Not so long ago, Nick Diaz along with Robbie Lawler arranged a real battle, and their spectacular rematch was a success. Nick came out after more than 5 years of inactivity and showed that he was still capable of fighting. Unfortunately, Diaz lost this fight and it's not known whether he will return to the UFC cage at all. But anyway, his appearance is always perceived by fans with great enthusiasm, since this guy lives all of himself in battle, and for this they love him. Today I would like to go many years back and remember the times when Nick was one of the most dangerous welterweights in Strikeforce and regularly performed unforgettable fights. In February 2007, Nick had his first and only fight in Pride FC, which turned out to be really bright. It was a fight with Pride FC's best lightweight Takanori Gomi, whom Diaz finished with gogoplata, but this spectacular victory was slightly overshadowed by the examen after the fight, which showed that Diaz used cannabis before the fight. For this he was stripped of the victory and the fight received a no contest, as well as Nick received a 6-month suspension. After serving his sentence, Nick went to the Elite XC organization and beat Mike Ain by split decision to get the lightweight title shot, and his opponent was Hawaiian KJ Nunes. Diaz couldn't transfer Nunes to canvas in this match for a very long time, as the Hawaiian's defense was at a good level, and when he did, KJ met Nick with a knee and he got a cut. After the first round, the fight was stopped by a doctor and Nunes became the lightweight champion, and Nick left the arena to show what he thinks about this decision. His next fight Diaz had half a year later. The fight was held in the Japanese organization Dream and the opponent was Katsue Inoue. Aggressive start from Nick, who was very good in this fight. He outplayed the Japanese in striking, and at the end of the first round the corners threw in the towel and decided to keep the fighter healthy.
Diaz. Diaz. Oh, there's the towel thrown in, it's over.
Soon Nick returned to America and performed in his native Stockton, where he was supported by a special atmosphere and he simply had no right to make a mistake. And his opponent was old-timer Thomas Denny. Denny started very actively and brought down everything he had in the opponent, so the first half of the round was completely up to him. But Diaz withstood this pressure and then changed the course of the fight. He pinned Thomas to the cage and began to crush his liver, breaking the body. Nick threw a lot of punches and combos, and at the end of the round was very close to the end of Denny, but he survived, however not for long. At the beginning of the second round, Nick held a long combo and managed to finish Thomas, and after the fight he sent greetings to Frank Shamrock, with whom they soon crossed paths. After that, Diaz was supposed to have a rematch with KJ Nunes, but he moved to Strikeforce and in April 2009, a fight with Frank Shamrock was organized. A tense press conference and traditional gestures of respect from Nick, and was eager to quickly spill blood of the legend, while Frank didn't fight for a year and lost his last fight to another Strikeforce star, Kong Lee. This fight had another small prehistory. Nick Diaz is one of those who considers the team his family, and all his career trains under Cesar Gracie, who had only one pro fight against Frank and was brutally knocked out, so I think Nick really wanted vendetta. Frank can't find his distance from the very beginning of the fight, and Nick feels like the owner of the cage. He provokes Frank and counterattacks well, and then moves the opponent to the ground. Nick felt more than confident in the pit, and this was another episode that Diaz took away. Nick continues to push and interrupt Frank, teasing and making faces, and at the end of the round it was very difficult for Shamrock. Diaz took a full mount and arranged merciless finishing with both hands, but he failed to finish the opponent. Not much changed in the second round. Diaz continued to dominate and Legend just couldn't find the keys to defeating the young and hungry Diaz. So that night Nick has been better than Frank in just every aspect. At the end of the round, Nick hit the body and apparently got into an injured rib, with which Frank went to the fight, well then finishing on the ground and stopping from John McCarthy. At the end of the fight, Nick helped Shamrock to get up and showed a lot of respect. This fight was the last for Frank and he ended his brilliant career. As for Nick, he had a fight with Scott Smith, whom he submitted in the third round and then got a welterweight title chance. At that time, the Strikeforce belt was vacant, and the second contender was the Dream Organization champion Mariusz Zaromskis, who was on a 13-3 record, and he finished most of his fights ahead of time. Diaz makes a beautiful knockout and becomes the first Strikeforce champion in the history of welterweight, and this victory was number 6 in a row. Nick beat Hayato Sakurai in Dream, and then there was one of the most famous fights of the Diaz brothers when they beat Jason Miller. They also fought Khabib's team at various times and threw bottles at Conor McGregor. When the Miller incident was resolved, Diaz made his first belt defense against KJ Nunes, who Nick really wanted to return the favor for the unfortunate loss. Nunes promised to beat Diaz again before the fight, but that night he was unlucky and Nick took the victory by unanimous decision, retaining his champion's belt. 3 months later, Nick received the next challenger, Cyborg Evangelista Santos, who always went to the cage with one goal: to knock out his opponent. The Cyborg was good at that. Cyborg starts with a head kick and then begins the destruction of the legs of Diaz. Santos hits the scariest low kicks that Nick doesn't have an answer for yet. So the first half of the round goes to Cyborg. At the end of the second round, Cyborg decided to make a takedown, but this was his fatal mistake. Armbar from Diaz and the Brazilian fighter is stopped. Nick took a lot of blows in this fight but still won a bright victory. After Cyborg, Nick took on even more dangerous challenge in the face of Paul Daley, at that time one of the toughest welterweight knockouts in Strikeforce. The fight got a great promotion and Paul assured everyone that Nick wouldn't risk going into an exchange with him as with the same Cyborg and trying to take him down. But Nick as always went against the system and surprised the fans by setting up a real drama that lasted only 1 round. This round was named the best in 2011 and one of the best in history, with enough events to last a couple of fights ahead. But in the first minute, Daley was close to knocking him out. But Diaz himself went to the exchange and forced Paul to make a takedown. Daley hit his signature left hook and knocks Nick down, but Diaz is fine. In the last seconds of the round, Diaz sends Paul to a knockdown, and then there are finishing touches and a bright victory for Nick. That's how Nick Diaz defended the champion's belt and made an incredible comeback. He became the first Strikeforce fighter to defend the welterweight title 3 times, and then had a move to the UFC where things didn't go so well. If you liked the review, then put likes, write if you liked the fight against Robbie Lawler, and would you like Nick to fight anyone again? And also, if you're not subscribed, subscribe and click on the bell to stay in touch and not to miss fresh reviews.